Welcome to the show, everybody. Chintan Sutaria is here with us. Chintan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. I'm really excited to be here.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about CalcuQuote and give us that background on what it is and that initial problem you were solving?
What we do is we work with electronics contract manufacturers, and these are companies that are building electronics assembly. So, think of your phone, a DVD player, anything. Those are kind of consumer goods sides, but there's also electronics in literally everything in the world. Our customers are the people behind the scenes, not the brand names that you're used to, but the people that are actually manufacturing and assembling these things. So we help them with their quoting and their purchasing processes. So here's kind of how the world worked before CalcuQuote came along is if I'm a contract manufacturer, my customer comes to me and says, I have this electronics thing. I want you to manufacture it for me. Make me 500 of these. How much will you charge? And what I have to do as a contract manufacturer now is look at every piece of material that's in there and individually price that. So I have to go into the market and say, who has this? How much does it cost? Is it in stock? What's the lead time for delivering it? All of those things, right? Your typical electronics assembly has hundreds of parts in it, right? So you start to think about how complex that gets. So you have this huge spreadsheet. They have to go spend hours and hours and hours researching. And then you come up with the material cost. And then you have to figure out how much is it going to cost in terms of labor and machine time to actually assemble it all. And then you add in the risk and all of those things. So that's what our software helps with is on the material side, we're kind of like what Kayak or Travelocity did for airlines is what we do for electronics components. So you put in your list of parts and CalcuQuote goes out to the supply chain all over the world, all these different companies and says, who's got this part? How much does it cost? What are the purchasing terms? All of that stuff compiles all of that information back so that the EMS company can say, I've got all this information at my fingertips now. Let me just run it based off of these parameters, and here's my material cost. So what used to take hours and hours, if not days, of work now takes 2 minutes.
Wow. I can't imagine that complexity of all of those components. That's incredible. So were you really the first to sort of put that together in a meaningful way for these manufacturers?
The reason that we, I think, had this unique position is because I had done the job myself before. I grew up in this industry. I didn't come at it as a software developer. I came at it as somebody who had the problem personally. And so for me, it was, okay, I know a lot of nuances that go into this. So it's not as simple as just bring the pricing back. You got to think about, okay, when I load it into the machine, I have a certain amount of setup scrap and then a certain amount of run scrap. And then when I put the pricing together, I got to think about how much excess material I've got and what is the value of that. There's some complexities related to supply chain in there that having done the job, you understand. And so while there was softwares out there in the past, one, they weren't able to do that instant pull of information like we were. And two, they weren't designed around the use case of a user. They were designed around the use case of a software designer. And so that's where we kind of found our niche was to say, we understand you as well as you understand the problem you're trying to solve. One of those first customers we had, I was meeting with the buyer. So the company owner was like, hey, this looks good to me. It sounds good, but we got to make sure it's real. So you're going to sit down with one of my buyers and try a real quote, right? So she shows up to this, back then it was GoTo meeting or something like that. And we get on this thing and she logs in and I'm just telling her where to click and what to do. And 22 minutes later, she has a complete thing and she starts laughing. And I'm like, did it go wrong? Like what happened? And she goes, you should see my calendar. I blocked off the next 1.5 days to work on this. And we just did 22 minutes. So,
oh my
that's
goodness.
How to use the software. So yeah, it was very impactful, but getting somebody to even sit down and recognize that this is a possible solution to their problem. It's like, how could something only take seconds when I'm used to spending hours on it?
You're moving forward in terms of expansion, in terms of product evolution. What's next for you?
Yeah, so we have so many things going on simultaneously, which is both exciting and overwhelming. So a few things. One is I mentioned this earlier, we're in this next wave of hiring now, right? So we want to be able to take our message now in a broader scale than we are right now. So we have salespeople in all these countries. Now we want to turn this into a brand. And so that means instead of doing only direct selling, we want to be able to do people recognize and know what CalcuQuote means, right? So that's kind of the next evolution for us, is we want to be recognized within our industry. The second part of that is we want to continue to expand, and that doesn't just mean through direct sales. So we came up with this 2 years ago, I think, but it's I call it the 3-dimensional growth strategy. So basically, if you think about like 3 axes, like a 3D chart, you'd have geographical expansion, customer segment expansion, and then functionality. And so that means we've already started working on all 3, but expanding to Europe is an example of the geography stuff. Currently, we work with contract manufacturers primarily, but we're finding a really good fit for some adjacent companies to that. So cable assembly companies, other types of contract manufacturers, original equipment manufacturers that are also interested in what we're doing. It's just slight modifications to the product required to meet their use case. So that's kind of the customer segment. And then functionality wise, we started with quoting, where we just need to provide a quote to the customer. What we've added in now is purchasing, being able to do like an e-commerce experience, data connections, all of those things as well. So we have a bunch of
within the software itself.
It's more starting to look like an ecosystem of softwares now, instead of an individual software application that's all in one. So basically, you can pick and choose and adapt a solution to whatever the enterprise needs.
So how can folks reach out to you and learn more about CalcuQuote?
Absolutely. So I'm reachable through LinkedIn. So if you just go to chintansutaria.info, I think that takes you to my LinkedIn profile. I'm fairly active on there. And then CalcuQuote.com, and that's spelled exactly like it sounds, calcu, like calculator, quote.com. And it's funny, we have a chat widget on there, and sometimes I'll just start replying to chat messages as well. So variety of different ways to get a hold of me personally, as well as get a hold of the company CalcuQuote. And we have a bunch of job postings out right now too. So if anybody's interested in joining our band, then apply for those, or just reach out and say, this is what I do and I think I could be helpful.
Fantastic. Are you looking like job wise worldwide, mostly US? Where right now?
Yeah, we're really not geographically bound because we're a 100% virtual team. And so, we've got people in Spain, Germany, Italy, Finland, US. We'd like to be in one of those countries, but, if we find somebody great in another country, then we're open to it.
Awesome. We'll see you all next time.